And in that safe, the FBI found topless and lewd photographs of girls, correct?
Again, sir, I'll accept your representation. I don't know.
America, there's a huge red flag. The FBI director could not answer whether Donald Trump was on Epstein's
Gentleman's time has
list.
expired.
I mean, I think there were a dozen of them, and it was Trump with girls of an uncertain age at Epstein's Palm Beach house, where all of the things that he would ultimately be accused of took place. And I remember very vividly 3 of them. There are 2 in which Trump is, the girls, topless girls, are sitting on Trump's lap.
Because that information would have been brought to light by multiple administrations and FBI investigators over the course of the last 20 years.
Well, you know what? That's just not true, because no one knew about the creepy birthday message that Donald Trump wrote to Jeffrey Epstein until the Wall Street Journal disclosed it, and then all of a sudden, the Epstein estate provides it to Congress.
Well,
certainly, you weren't there at the search. Yeah, that's just false.
Okay.
That's just false. You're the frickin' FBI. You can subpoena the information from the estate, and you better do that.
Ted Lieu drops hidden audio in Congress. Patel freezes for 38 seconds. Nobody in that room saw it coming. Not the Republican members seated along the dais who had spent the first 90 minutes of the hearing asking about immigration enforcement statistics and bureau staffing levels. Not the attorneys flanking Kash Patel at the witness table. 2 of them, positioned close enough to whisper guidance whenever the questioning drifted somewhere uncomfortable. Not the reporters lining the back wall with notebooks already open, waiting for the familiar choreography of a congressional oversight hearing to play out the way it always plays out. Questions asked, answers deflected. Time expires. Everyone goes home. Congressman Ted Lieu did not arrive that morning to participate in the choreography. Before he became a congressman from California, before the committee assignments and the television appearances and the procedural gavel recognition, Ted Lieu served as a military prosecutor in the United States Air Force Judge Advocate General's Corps. A JAG officer, that detail matters more than almost anything else about what happened in room 2141 of the Rayburn House Office building on this particular morning. Military prosecutors operate in an environment where evidence is everything, and preparation is the difference between a case that holds and a case that collapses. They learn something early that civilian attorneys sometimes take years to understand. The most powerful moment in any interrogation is not the question. It is the moment the witness realizes the investigator has something they did not know existed. Lieu had spent years watching Patel and officials like him survive congressional hearings by controlling the language of every exchange. He had watched the same defensive vocabulary appear again and again. I cannot confirm that. I would need additional context. That matter is still under review. He had watched witnesses survive on procedure because procedure protects them. Questions expire when the clock runs out, but evidence does not expire, and that was the difference on this morning. Patel arrived at the hearing the way he always arrives. Water glass on the table. Stack of briefing papers. 2 attorneys positioned for maximum coverage. The posture of a man who has done this many times before and intends to do it many times again. For the first 90 minutes, he performed exactly as expected. Republican members gave him open questions, the kind that allow a witness to speak with confidence and appear in command of the institution they lead. Democratic members shifted to the Epstein files, to terminated investigations, to questions about prosecutorial priorities inside the Bureau. Patel handled all of it. Anyone watching closely would have recognized the technique. Questions reframed, answers narrowed to their least dangerous form, language constructed carefully enough to avoid committing to anything that could be contradicted later by documents. It was not dramatic, it was professional evasion. And by the second hour, Patel looked exactly like a man who had decided he would survive another hearing the same way he had survived all the others. Then the clock reached 11:19 a.m. Chairman Jim Jordan looked down the dais and recognized the next member for questioning. Mr. Lieu, you are recognized for 5 minutes. Lieu stood up slowly. He did not carry a binder. No color-coded tabs. No stack of documents the way members sometimes prepare for televised hearings. On the desk in front of him sat only 2 things. A single printed transcript page, turned face down, and a small digital audio device. Nothing about the scene appeared unusual. Congressional desks are cluttered with electronics. Nobody on Patel's legal team reacted. Nobody in the press gallery had any idea what was about to happen. Director Patel, Lieu began, his voice carrying the flat, controlled tone that prosecutors develop when they are building a record for future proceedings. I want to talk to you about a conversation. That line alone changed the energy in the room. Hearings revolve around policies, statistics, documents. When a prosecutor narrows the focus to a conversation, it means something specific. The witness's own words are about to become evidence. Lieu continued. Specifically, I want to talk about a conversation you had on January 31st, 2025, 11 days after you became FBI director. Patel shifted in his chair. It was a small movement, the kind that might escape notice on a television screen but registers immediately in an investigative environment where body language is information. Do you recall that date? Lieu asked. Patel leaned toward the microphone. Congressman, I have conversations on many dates in the course of my duties. I would need additional context to identify any specific exchange. Anyone familiar with congressional testimony recognized that answer instantly. It was not a denial. It was a stall. Lieu nodded once. I will give you context, he said. On January 31st, 2025, at approximately 8:14 in the evening, you were inside the J. Edgar Hoover building. According to building security access logs, you entered a 7th-floor conference room designated for director-level sensitive discussions. You remained in that room for 47 minutes. He looked directly at Patel. Do you have any recollection of that evening? This time the movement was more noticeable. Patel's right hand slid slowly toward the edge of the table. His senior attorney leaned forward. Congressman, Patel answered carefully. The specifics of internal discussions conducted in sensitive facilities are not something I can characterize in an open setting. Again, not a denial, another stall. Lieu did not argue. He placed the transcript page back down on a desk and said 4 words that removed every escape route Patel had left. I am not asking you to characterize the discussion. I am asking whether you recall being in that building, in that room, on that evening. Yes or no? 4 seconds of silence. I was in the building frequently during that period, Patel replied finally. I cannot confirm or deny the specific location you are describing. That was the moment Ted Lieu turned toward the committee chair and said 11 words that made the entire room lean forward at the same time. For the record, he said, I am about to play a 34-second audio recording. Across the witness table, Patel's lead attorney was already rising. Mr. Chairman, the attorney said sharply, I must object to the introduction of any recording without prior disclosure to opposing counsel and without an established chain of custody. Chairman Jordan responded before the objection could gain traction. The documentation has been submitted to the committee. The objection is noted and overruled. He looked back toward Lisa Balber. You may proceed. Lisa Dalton pressed play. What came out of the speaker was not what people are used to hearing in viral recordings. No distortion, no static, no echo of a phone line. What the room heard was a perfectly clean acoustic signature, the soft, padded quiet of a secure conference room, the subtle dampening that happens when walls are built to absorb voices rather than carry them. The microphone that captured the recording had been close enough that the speaker's voice arrived without interference, and that voice was unmistakable. For 15 months, Kash Patel's voice had filled hearing rooms across Washington, press conferences, committee testimony, televised interviews. The cadence was familiar. The clipped delivery, the slight flattening of vowels that appears when someone is choosing words carefully. Nobody in that chamber needed a forensic analyst to tell them whose voice they were hearing. 7 words. That was all the recording contained. Spoken with the low, conversational tone people use when they believe the conversation will never leave the room. Trump told me to bury it. All of it. Then the recording stopped, and the hearing room entered the strangest 38 seconds anyone in Washington could remember. Silence in a congressional chamber is never truly silent. Papers shuffle, staff whisper, camera shutters click. The constant movement of people produces background noise that never fully disappears. But at 11:22 a.m., room 2A41 stopped moving. Reporters at the back wall froze with pens suspended above their notebooks. One camera operator lowered his headset slightly as if unsure whether he had heard correctly. Members of Congress leaned forward, elbows on the polished wooden desks, staring at the witness table. No one spoke. At the center of that silence sat Kash Patel, hands flat on the table, fingers slightly spread against the wood. His posture had not collapsed, but it had changed in the way investigators noticed immediately. His shoulders had gone rigid, not tense in the way a person braces for confrontation, but rigid in the way a body locks when the brain is processing a sudden threat. His breathing was visible, shallow, the kind of breathing that happens when the body is deciding whether to fight, deny, or remain still long enough for the mind to catch up. He did not look at Lieu. He did not look at Chairman Jordan. He did not look at the cameras pointed directly at his face. Most importantly, he did not look at the attorneys sitting beside him. That detail matters because witnesses under pressure almost always search for guidance. They glance sideways. They lean toward counsel. Their eyes look for reassurance that the next answer is legally safe. Patel did none of those things. He stared forward, completely still. People move when they are thinking about what to say. People freeze when they are thinking about what cannot be said. 38 seconds. Then Liu stepped back to the microphone. Director Patel. His voice did not carry anger. It carried the measured tone of someone who had already done the difficult part and was now guiding the record forward. Did you hear that the way I heard it? He paused. I am going to ask you one question, and I want you to think carefully before you answer because you are under oath and because what you say in the next 30 seconds will be entered into the congressional record permanently. He looked directly at Patel. Is the voice on that recording your voice? For a fraction of a second, it appeared Patel might answer immediately. His mouth opened, then closed. The attorney to his right stood up so quickly his chair rolled backward. Congressman, the lawyer said sharply, my client cannot authenticate or respond to a recording of unknown provenance in a public setting without the opportunity to review the full context of the material. Liu turned toward the attorney with the patience of someone who has heard the same procedural move many times before. Counselor, he said calmly, I asked your client whether that is his voice. He paused. That is a yes or no question about something he has known his entire life. That sentence contained the trap. Liu had not asked Patel to explain the recording. He had not asked him to discuss the context or the circumstances. He had asked whether the voice belonged to him. A denial would be simple. A confirmation would be devastating, and silence would travel across the internet before the hearing even ended. Liu turned back to the witness table. Director Patel. Is that your voice? Several seconds passed. Then Patel leaned toward the microphone. Congressman, he said, his voice now lower than at any point in the hearing, I am not going to comment on the authenticity of a recording I have not had the opportunity to review with counsel in an appropriate setting. In legal terms, that sentence is not a denial, it is a refusal. And refusals carry their own meaning. Liu did not press. Instead, he picked up the transcript page that had been lying face down since the beginning of his questioning and turned it over for the first time. It was not handwritten notes. It was a certified transcript. 34 seconds of dialogue printed line by line with a timestamp, a date, and a location marker at the bottom. He held it up slightly. Director Patel, he said quietly, this transcript has been authenticated by 2 independent forensic audio analysts whose certifications have been submitted to this committee. He lowered the page. At the bottom of the transcript is a location marker corresponding to Conference Room 7C in the J. Edgar Hoover Building, the room you just told this committee you cannot confirm or deny being in on January 31st. Patel's fingers tightened against the wood, and for the first time since the audio had played, he looked sideways, not at Liu, at his attorney. The glance lasted less than a second, but in investigative environments, that kind of glance is as loud as a spoken answer. When a witness finally looks at counsel after a piece of evidence appears, it means the witness has reached the point where personal instinct can no longer guide the response. The decision has stopped being about reputation and started being about exposure. Liu noticed the glance. He allowed the room to sit with it. Then he repeated the 7 words slowly, placing each one into the permanent congressional record. Trump told me to bury it. He let the weight settle. If those words were spoken inside FBI headquarters 11 days after you assumed office, then every statement you have made to Congress about independent investigative judgment becomes subject to review. He leaned slightly toward the microphone. On the evening of January 31st, 2025, did someone from the Trump administration instruct you to bury the Epstein investigation? For a moment, no one moved. Then Patel's lead counsel rose from his seat, one hand placed lightly on the table. Congressman, he said, At this time, my client invokes his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and will not answer that question or any subsequent questions derived from the recording you have introduced. There are sentences that end arguments. That was one of them. Ted Lieu nodded once. For the record, he said calmly, the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation has invoked the Fifth Amendment in response to a question about whether he was instructed to bury the Epstein investigation. He paused. Director Patel had the opportunity to deny the statement captured on that recording. He could have told this committee the words were not his. He could have told the American public the recording was fabricated. Instead, when asked directly whether those words were spoken under instruction from the Trump administration, he invoked his constitutional right against self-incrimination. He placed the transcript page back on the desk. A denial costs nothing. Invoking the Fifth costs everything. And if those 7 words are not his, there would be no reason to refuse the question. By evening, both forensic audio analysts had appeared on camera confirming their certifications. Spectral voice analysis. Voice print comparison. No evidence of compression, synthesis, or alteration. The recording was authentic. 3 separate oversight bodies confirmed receipt of the material that afternoon: the Department of Justice Inspector General, the FBI Office of Professional Responsibility, the Senate Intelligence Committee. Subpoena discussions began within hours. 7 words, 38 seconds of silence, 1 invocation of the Fifth Amendment. That sequence now exists permanently in the congressional record. And the question facing Washington is no longer whether those words were spoken. The recording answered that. The question is what the system does next. Whether the investigation stops at the moment of silence or follows the evidence wherever 7 words lead. Because if the director of the FBI was told to bury an investigation into one of the most serious criminal networks ever documented on American soil, then the issue is not partisan politics. It is whether the rule of law in the United States applies equally to everyone, including the people who hold power over the system itself.